Hi, Tom. Welcome to the NTM Growth Marketing Podcast. I am excited to be speaking with you about AI today.
Excellent. Thank you. Great to be here as well.
Let's start off and hear a little bit more about your organization and your role at the company. Can you start us off and share some more information about that?
Absolutely. PeopleReign is a company focused on providing better employee experiences, right? Because at the end of the day, when we need to get stuff done at work, like I need to change my 401k, if my wife's having a baby, if I need to order a new laptop,
Mhm.
it's frustrating to have to call into a service desk or to have to call in and end up waiting and not getting it done and a bunch of other stuff. We're really looking to solve that problem, right? So we believe using artificial intelligence, we can divine a bot that will hopefully give everyone back at least an hour a week back for something other than dealing with help desk. I can go off and enjoy my life, spend time with my family. So that's kind of our mission in life, is to make that employee experience as great as we can.
And what's your role at the company?
I run the marketing department for PeopleReign.
Have you been involved in marketing your whole career?
Yes. Well, so I'm a converted developer. So I started back in the old days as a developer, and then I was at Microsoft for a couple of years as they were starting up, what they call technical marketing. And then I got into marketing, and then I kind of stayed in and helped build out kind of what became the digital marketing boom, right? We worked for a company that was one of the first to come out with the idea of digital marketing and a website that tracked you and emails and kind of the all-in-one. And then I've just been in that field since then for a lot longer than I care to admit.
What was it about marketing that drew you to the field?
I think for me, it was I love development, and development's very cut and dry, right? Either your code works or it doesn't. And I really was looking for something that I could get some human interaction. I could really start to look in the gray area, is how I think about it, right? What made people purchase? What made people move forward? And when I got into it at Microsoft, we were focused on developers. So I was getting to work with developers. I was trying to understand at the time why Java versus .NET, what the trends were. And I really got hooked on this idea of the data and all of the data that goes along with marketing. And then really being able to try to look at the data, build a strategy around it, execute it, and then see what worked, what didn't, then continue to adjust. So that's really what hooked me, was the data in marketing.
Were you involved in marketing during the dot-com crash in the early 2000s?
I was, well, sort of. I was just starting at Microsoft in 2000.
Okay.
I was actually a consultant in Microsoft Consulting Services at the time. I had had my own business before that, and we were just starting to get into kind of the idea of technical marketing at that time.
So you've survived three once in a lifetime events between .com, 2008, COVID a few years later. What have you noticed in marketing during those extreme economic events that have happened, in the last 25 years now?
It's kind of fascinating. There's a couple of things. I think the first thing is companies that aren't focused on business value and increasing productivity don't do well, right? Because I can't come to you and I say, hey, I have this great technology, and it's like technology for technology's sake. I need to come to you and I need to say, hey, look, we're going to provide business value. We're going to reduce costs. We're going to
Mhm.
provide better productivity. There's some outcome that my business is going to drive for your business. And if you focus on that, which is interesting, because at PeopleReign, we've always focused on that. But other companies, it's usually a pivot, because it moves from this, hey, I have great technology, to how much are we going to save you? What can we offer back to the business? And that's really been the focus. And it also is really about the focus of providing great customer service, right? Because in each of those, because once I connect with you and once we sell you our software, our services, or whatever it is, we have to continue providing that great customer service and continuing to evolve, because we're going to find that you might need new services or new products, and that our best customers are the one that's going to direct the company, right? I mean, it's really about who your ICP is, ideal candidate or ideal customer profile, being able to use them to help you drive your business successfully once you start selling to them.
Can you expand a little bit more on what an ICP is?
Yeah, so an ideal customer profile, at the end of the day, when I left Microsoft, I've been in startups pretty much ever since. And everybody wants to sell everything to everyone, right?
Right.
Because, and you know this, right? It's like my product, fits everyone from my teenage son who's in college to, my parents or my grandparents and everyone in between, and all the different industries. The reality is, if you're going to grow a business and you're going to be successful, you have to look at this ideal candidate profile, and companies will call it different things. But at the end of the day, it's the people that are going to buy your product. So it's not my son, it's going to be, for PeopleReign, it's going to be businesses that are focused on improving customer experience. They have a mandate around that. They have a service desk process in place. They know kind of how much that costs. They want to reduce it. And then I always think of it when I come to a new startup, the first thing I do is I sit down with the CEO and I build out an ICP. And we look at company, we look at company name, we look at titles, we try to drill in, and it has to be real and useful. So, for example, a lot of times they'll say, well, especially with AI, it's a CEO who wants to be famous and build out their career, and it's like, well, it's a little hard to market to, right? You have to find and build an ICP that really is marketable. I need to know kind of titles. You could do some demographic, firmographic kinds of information. So you build out that candidate profile, and then you go and you test it. You test the hell out of it. You're going to have a lot of failures and you're going to have a lot of positives. And then, for example, at PeopleReign, we keep redefining, right? We started with our ICP, and then we kept narrowing it, narrowing and narrowing it. And the biggest thing that's hard for companies of all sizes is who not to sell with. I often think of it as our ideal, which is green. Somebody comes in. Yellow might be inbound opportunities that aren't green, people that come in that show interest, but I wouldn't spend a lot of time on those. And then red is everyone else. So what does that mean? If I'm in the red sector, we're not going to talk to you, right? It's just, we're not going to be rude, obviously, but we're not going to really talk to you. Green is what we're looking for. Who are the green people? CIO in a Fortune 500 company who has a staff of 10 people, who may have an employee experience man. I mean, you could kind of see how we drill it all down. But success in marketing these days, I think, is really built on this idea of building out that ICP and then continuing to adjust it. And like I said, the data says it all on top of that.
So for an organization that is going through the ICP process at the early onset, their startup, what advice would you give them of how do they even discover who their ICP is? Is it, going on Reddit and following trends? Is it Twitter hashtags? Is it going on the street and just surveying people? How can they discover who that ICP really is?
No, that's a great question. And usually the way I approach it is, the first thing is, you have a CEO. The CEO has a very important opinion. And he typically, excuse me, will start with what he thinks the ICP is. And then, to your point, is he right? A lot of the times, not so much, but I need to
Can I
go out.
interject real quick with a
Yeah.
question and then please continue on? Is how do you challenge the CEO when he or she is wrong?
You have to be open and honest, right? I mean, I
Mhm.
sit down with the CEO. I have a worksheet that I've used, for years. It's nothing, major, but I will ask him questions. And then when I get questions like, well, our best candidate is someone who wants to grow their career, and they're already a CIO of a Fortune 500 company. It's like, so how do you quantify that? And
Mhm.
I just keep asking kind of those questions. And then if it's not marketable, I have to say, okay, so it doesn't feel like I can market to that, and this is why. And then I usually put it in a parking lot for the time being. I think they're all
Got it.
important opinions. I'm not going to ignore what he or she says,
Right.
but the reality is you've got to challenge it. And then to your point, once I end up with that straw man, then I go out and I do as much research as I can, right? If you're a larger company, you might have a research budget. A lot of smaller startups don't. So, as you said, places like Reddit, places like LinkedIn, because LinkedIn offers such fantastic targeting. You want to look in the forums, you want to try to understand, what the trends are. And if that ICP starts to match, then you want to move into, simple things like emailing. You want to come up with, topics that make sense for those folks, test it, and you have to be, I used to have someone who worked with me. We used to talk about being ruthlessly relevant. If I send out an email and that email gets, unfortunately, a 1 or 2% open rate, and we're expecting a 10% open rate, is that something we want to do again? Right.
Mhm.
And it's okay to say, hey, we're going to do a bunch of tests. But you need to be relevant and you need to be ruthless. Nope, that's not working. Let's try
Mhm.
something else. And you keep redefining that. The best people, and unfortunately, I apologize, I didn't mention them, is if you have a sales staff, spending time with the sales staff, right? Usually you leave the CEO's office and you can go sit with the sales folks, and you're going to get some good information. They're talking to people constantly, right?
Mhm.
And a lot of times you find that there's kind of a mismatch between who they're talking to and what the CEO says. And you
Right.
have to start to try to figure that out, right? And then redirect, who's right. At the end of the day, if sales is closing deals and it's not matching what the ICP is the ICP wrong, or are we selling to the wrong people? And you can see that from unhappy customers, from product market fit that isn't happening, to, all of the other issues. If you've got high churn, clearly you may have an ICP issue, right? And if people are
Mhm.
churning and they're leaving because you don't do, A, B, and C, and you're like, yeah, but we don't do that because that's not our industry, then you're clearly in the wrong ICP. But unfortunately, and I'm sure you know this, right? The ICP is never done. I
Right.
mean, we are constantly editing it, and modifying it, and testing it, and making, new examples out of it and new tests out of it. I'm currently working on, we're going to do a set of campaigns, and I'm focused on, taglines and subject
Mhm.
lines and all that kind of stuff that's going to help drive that new campaign, which hopefully is going to start filling our top of funnel, in a more consistent manner. But I mean, it's the struggle of every marketing person out there,
Mhm.
right?
What are some of your favorite ways to test? Are there some grassroots things you like? Do you do, rapid prototyping in Facebook ads? What do you enjoy most from a testing perspective?
No, I think it's a great question. So I tend to do rapid prototyping on things like LinkedIn ads.
Mhm.
And I like LinkedIn. Well, a lot of what I've done is B2B type selling, and
Mhm.
LinkedIn gives me a lot of control over who I can target, and I can measure actions. I've done some testing on Instagram. I haven't seen on the B2B side, a lot of success at it, and it just could be that the businesses aren't getting people on Instagram and or Facebook. Second is reaching out to industries, trying to get involved in industry consortiums. There's everything from, we're in the service desk industry. There's all sorts of service desk industries and associations that you can get involved in. And these are all low cost opportunities. And that you need to start thinking about building thought leadership around that, right? So if you have some thought leadership, email is a great one, right? Testing subject headers. If you have some content, test some subject headers. Do you get people to open it up? Does it drive people in? Webinars, as we talked about, I think just before, right? Webinars are a great example. It's a pretty low cost way to get people to go ahead and sign up for things. If I have, the right email going out, I'm going to get the right people in, and I'm going to start to see the right follow-up. So for me, a webinar truly isn't successful until you get through the follow-up. It's always great to say from a vanity metric, I had 500 people sign up, right? But at the end of the day, if you get 500 people sign up and you don't get one single appointment out of it, is that really successful? So these are all the kinds of things you can do. And a lot of those are done at fairly low cost. And of course, if you have some money, go out and look at, industry lists, a lot of, like CIO.com or whatever, they all offer you the opportunity to run campaigns with them. And that's okay. A lot of times in smaller startups, you're kind of scrambling for, every dollar that you have. So you want to prove before you go and you do those.
So we came in contact because you received one of my emails to pull the curtain back. I forget if you got the email with some of the GIFs inserted into it. That might have been some of our follow-up emails where I thought, I just had this idea where I was thinking about who our ICP was. And I was thinking our ICP is someone who got a GIF from Dwight from The Office, would find that funny. And I would be polarizing people correctly. Like, I want either people to say, this is really unprofessional, like, why are you sending me this Dwight meme? Or someone is going to, have watched The Office for the third time already, like this year, and they see that Dwight meme, they're like, all right, that's kind of funny. I'll give them at least, a response back and see what happens. And we use Lemless just as a software for anyone listening. I think we pay $50 a month. It's pretty solid. And then on Fiverr, you could get, for $25, I think 100 email addresses, they'll help you research. So it's a really, in my opinion, cost-effective way to just start testing. And that kind of leads into a question I had where you've talked a lot about data and how, you need to kill off campaigns that aren't working. And, you have to be, what was it, ruthlessly
relevant.
Ruthlessly relevant. Can you talk a little bit more around the importance of goal setting and metrics and marketing, and how at the end of the day, vanity metrics don't mean anything. We really need to be making sure this is helping to drive business growth.
No, it's true. I remember, and I'm sure you do, right? The old days where it's like, I got 6,000 impressions, and we were like, woohoo, marketing would do a little dance and sales would roll its eyes, that kind of thing. The reality is you have to define metrics that drive the business, right? And, you're starting to see a lot of this over the years. So things like, in the old days, marketing and sales were so siloed, and now we're starting to come together. So defining metrics that matter should be a combination of sales and marketing getting together. And you have to figure out, is it actual revenue, right? Are you far enough along that you can say, if we do this and get, 50 people in, we'll get one sale? Or is it appointments, or is it something? And you have to manage to that. In marketing, we can use, and I'll use, the vanity metrics to help me get to that end goal, right? If I put up a LinkedIn post and if I don't get, 1,000 impressions, my gut tells me I'm not going to get anyone to download anything.
Right.
So the reality is, you as a team have to continue to manage that. I tend to be more on the agile side. I've as a developer, a former developer, I loved agile, and I've always stuck with it. And we tend to do daily stand-ups and then weekly, a weekly review of everything that's going on. So daily, the sales team and I will connect and we'll say, okay, this is in market. What have you seen? And to your point, they may have had that email go out, and I've had this happen. It's like, oh my God, those people, we did a meme from, I forget the movie, and nobody liked it. Apparently we got a lot of feedback on it. I'll say it that way. And that was good. So I pulled that
Right.
email right away because clearly our ICP was not happy with that.
Right.
And I can adjust. And then, so daily, we're getting feedback from sales, from marketing, from SDRs, if they're involved, everyone in that group as we build out that campaign and then execute. And then weekly, we're looking at, the results. Hey, did we get appointments, right? Did we get, revenue? Did we get, whatever your thing is? Weekly, we're also adjusting, right? If we realize that we initially said, and I think every marketer listening to this, we start with, we're going to get $1 million in revenue. And then you realize, 2 weeks in, yeah, we're going to get like 100,000, and you can keep adjusting. And what I usually do is I just keep an Excel spreadsheet that has the list of objectives, or sorry, the list of goals. And then every week, if we adjust them, I just create a new list so that we as a group can see how things are going. But it's experiment, it's check with your teams, and then go ahead and manage the goals is how I tend to approach a lot of this stuff.
I have a question stemming from that around accountability. Can you give advice of holding your marketing team accountable, and whether that's the pure KPIs of what you want to hit, it hits or it doesn't, creatives, if they're just producing stuff that you think is going to fall flat, and sometimes in my experience creatives can take that personal versus just a subjective, this isn't going to convert and lead our ICP down the sales pipeline. Can you talk about, holding your marketing team accountable and what that looks like for you?
Yeah, no, that's a great question because, like you, I've seen some creatives can get annoyed,
Right.
if you say, well, that I don't like that, or I don't think it'll fit. And I've also told people that and then allowed them to go forward with it, and I was wrong. So,
Right.
there's a high balance there. What I do is I look at what you're doing daily to help contribute to that goal, right? And then try to hold you accountable in a daily stand up, right? What are you going to do today to drive this campaign? And then if there's stuff that needs to be approved or stuff we need to look at, we all look at it as a group and we all accept. Part of the issue of accountability, having come from a company like Microsoft in the old days, right, where everything was a stick and there wasn't a lot of carrots. I tend to try to do both and celebrate failure, right, and allow people some room to fail. Fail early, fail often, fail fast, but don't fail the same way twice,
Mhm.
right? So a lot of what I'll do with those groups is hold them accountable for daily deliveries against our weekly targets. And if we're
Mhm.
not hitting that, we all have a problem. And we can celebrate some of the failures, but we need to celebrate the success as well. People get, and I'm sure you've seen this, right? We all get unhappy if all I do is, oh my God, you missed this, you missed that. It should be a group. If
Mhm.
you put out a creative that, didn't get well received, it's not your fault, it's the group's fault. And ultimately, it's my fault as your manager
Mhm.
because I allowed it to go out. However, what can we learn from this? And that's an important part to me of a daily or a weekly stand up, right? If you're reviewing goals, is what did we learn yesterday, right? And what we did. And then weekly, what did we learn about our goals moving forward? So I tend to hold people accountable around their goals, but it's also a balancing act of I
Mhm.
shouldn't beat you up if you don't, if you're not delivering what you say you're going to deliver against your goals.
Mhm.
So that's how I look at accountability. I know some managers and some of my peers do it much more against a set of goals. And I think goals are great. And I like to manage people to goals over the long term. But if you think of campaigns as these short set of activities that we do, it's hard for me to hold you accountable. And then you get into things like, this was always the big thing. Well, if you're going to do 3 emails this week and you do 5 emails, well, you've gone 150% of your goal. And it's like, yeah, no. Did you do 3 emails and did you get, I don't know, the click rate that we were looking for? That to me is positive. And if you didn't get the click rate that we were looking for, what can we learn and how can we adjust? At the end of the day, the group has to stand together with the sales team and we all have to agree it was a success or a failure. And then, what did we get out of it? So, it's all about breaking those silos down is how I've started focusing on things over the last couple of years, especially.
Is there a marketing medium that you're invested in that you're surprised has delivered results for you, whether this year or in the last handful of years? I'll give an example of, everyone's obsessed with TikTok. That might not be relevant to you all as a B2B business
Right.
and how it's a sexy thing that everyone's doing, but a company, is saying, in actuality, I just gave away some free t-shirts and that's driving better results for me, or just handwritten thank you card campaigns, actually led to a lot of new business creation. Is there any marketing medium you're experiencing that is, something you might not think of that actually is helping you drive results?
Yeah, there's a couple. And you actually said one that came into my head, which was thank you cards, right?
Mhm.
Handwritten thank you cards. Even in today's world, having someone write a handwritten thank you for a meeting or when new customers come on board, having the CEO write a nice thank you, hey, we're happy you're here. This
Mhm.
has led to good referral business as well in the
Mhm.
future. And I've walked into customers' office. I go visit them on site, and I walk in, and it's actually something that their CEO or CIO or whoever will have up on their bulletin board,
Really?
or they'll have it up. Oh yeah, it's interesting when I sit down across the desk from you. And I look up and I see, kind of, our letterhead, our nice card stock that's there. And I say, oh, is that? And it's like, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, because they value it, right?
Mhm.
Because people took the time to handwrite. So that's actually been one. The second one is really creating your own data, right? Creating your own surveys, creating
Mhm.
your own market, and then turning that into a leadership piece. A lot of people, we use Amazon Turk. So if you're not familiar with it, Amazon Turk allows you to hire people to answer surveys. And you can kind of target people quite a bit in that. And it's a great way of getting data about your market and then being able to wrap that into a thought leadership piece.
Mhm.
The last thing that we've seen or that I've seen is building thought leadership classes, right? So
Your
a
webinars?
lot of, yeah, thought leadership classes, courses, webinars,
Mhm.
podcasts, right? These are all things that get people to listen and to interact with your brand, right? Part of that is um, we did a lot of courses at the last couple of startups where we would bring people in because we had thought leadership, right? We had a lot
Mhm.
of people who knew a lot of stuff about the industry. At PeopleReign, we run one of the most successful podcasts on AI and the future of work, right? And this gets people to listen to us and gets them exposed. And these are kind of low cost mediums. The big issue with these is and I'm sure you've seen this on a podcast, right? How do you know that people convert?
Right.
Meaning, if I listen to your podcast while I'm out walking my dogs, how does that convert? And what I found over the years is that you just got to believe if you're watching your numbers go up on downloads, that you have to believe. And then we start asking people in accounts that we're in, like, hey, have you heard of this? Oh yeah, I listen to that every week. Or oh yeah, and you start to get that market penetration that's there. So those were surprising things for me over the last couple of years that I've seen. And it's all about the hunt for data, and it's all about the hunt for thought leadership, and then getting people to engage with you. And I call it low intent, right? Because in the old days, right, Andrew, you and I would put up a web page and you would give me your email and you would download something, right? We
Right.
are starting to move away from that quite a bit. I noticed on my website as well as others that they're starting, and I'm starting to give away more free stuff, right? Because it takes a bit for you to give me your email address, because nobody wants to get random crappy emails from people if they don't know it's worthwhile.
Right.
So you have to invest in that to get to the end result. And I think the journey's changed quite a bit. Now it's about getting your email address initially, obviously, or outreach. But then once I have your email address, I need to make sure that you're seeing the damn emails. That's the biggest issue, right? Is I'm sure I could send you 100 emails, and if I'm lucky, maybe one or two don't get picked out as spam, or you read them or you don't read them. And so it's about making you look for our emails and making you look for that engagement. And then people listening to your podcast, right? Whenever it comes out on Monday, they're always looking for that new episode to download within their podcast app. So that's my personal opinion.
Do you have any go-to podcasts you listen to on a personal level?
A few. So I've listened to yours. On the marketing side, I tend to listen to, I think it's Marketer to Marketer, and Marketing Over Coffee is the other one that I listen to.
Awesome.
I love, and I hate to say this, it'll sound horrible. I love a lot of the true crime podcasts. I don't know if that makes me, a weirdo, but I like some of the true crime podcasts, which I think are pretty good. The Today Show is a great way to get news and get kind of deep insights into things. On the AI front, obviously, we listen. This is our own podcast, AI in the Future of Work, and then there's a few other AI podcasts that I find interesting. Yeah, so how? I guess the question I would always ask people is, how many people have replaced just listening to the radio, or listening to music when you walk your dogs or you drive or anything else, to listening to podcasts? And I think I've noticed in my own behavior that I'm starting to you know change quite a bit and get more into how much podcast can I listen to as I'm going somewhere. And then I'll say, oh, I feel
Mhm.
like hearing about, I don't know, marketing, or I feel like about AI, but I think podcasts are starting to become a lot more of the norm these days.
It's a much cooler thing to be doing now.
Mhm.
And it's a very, intimate experience. Like I have a routine Monday to Friday, get up, I make some coffee and I listen to my favorite daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast for the first 10 minutes of the day. If you're to, I know some of the data is, weird if you're on Libsyn and kind of the back end, but if I were to look at my own podcast data, it's almost guaranteed every single day, Monday to Friday, I listen to a 10-minute Steelers podcast right as I wake up. And it's a very, powerful thing that's part of my daily routine now, that I put him
Yep.
in my ear with my beats, and that's how I start my day.
Yeah. No, it's amazing how relevant a lot of these podcasts are and how much we spend our time, right? I
Mhm.
mean, the old days, I used to get up, make coffee, and I turn on CNN or whatever.
Right.
Now, my wife and I do the similar. We'll get up, we'll make coffee, and she'll have on, I don't know, like the Daily Show or something like
Mhm.
that, and we'll listen to that in a podcast. But it's about changing behaviors,
Mhm.
and think how much power those people have, right?
Right.
As they start to talk about brands and that kind of stuff. So it's a very much a new medium that people are starting to get into.
I just have a few last questions. The first one is, can you tell us about a marketing campaign you're really proud of, and share a little bit more around whether it's results or just, why this is a proud campaign of yours?
I would probably say it was, and I can't take full credit for this. It was my team, and there was actually a lady called Katie Bull who, if she finds this, she had a huge hand in it as well. But the company we were at was looking to redefine how they were seen in the market. And the reality is, when I started there, they were seen kind of in one way, and we needed to change that. And in a small company, creating a new category is almost next to impossible.
Mhm.
The reality is what we did, and this was data that we went out. We went out and surveyed folks. We used Amazon Turk. We ended up partnering with some of the larger like CIO.com and HR.com and some of the others to collect a set of data that we then released in a white paper, in an executive summary, in an infographic, and in a press release. And that to me became the change where that category started getting defined. You knew that happened when it was probably about 2 weeks later. We got picked up in a couple of trade magazines, talking about how there's this new thing, right? And every reporter wants to be the one who said they came up with it. And then it was about a month or two later, I heard when we were talking to an analyst asking me about this category. And then we saw all of our competitors start to switch their websites and use the same messaging. So
Mhm.
that was something that I was super proud of, because it was an opportunity to rebrand a company and build out a category that we actually pulled off. I got much better results. I had figured we could get some splash, on the PR side, and we would get some downloads and this and that. But the thing snowballed, and we did it for 2 or 3 years, and really continued to see that becoming an important marker in the industry. And people would call up and say, hey, when is this report out? Or, my copy is now 6 months old. And it's like, dude, we're getting to it. So we were switching from, just kind of randomly putting stuff out there to being a huge force in the market.
Mhm.
So that's the thing that I would say I'm most proud of.
Awesome. So my last question is, what is the best purchase you've made for under $100 in the last 6 months, personal or professional?
Oh, that's awesome. So under $100. All right. So um, here's what I was thinking about. So I am a scuba diver, and that's what I do in my spare time. I love to dive. I do a lot of underwater photography. Um, and published a couple of books, that kind of stuff. And when I saw that question, I'm like, so $100 isn't all that much in today's world.
Right.
However, on underwater cameras, so you have to think about a camera that sits in a housing, right? And the housing itself can be super large. And you end up with a lens cap that goes on the front. So your camera has a lens cap, that shoots through what they call a tube. Those lens caps, I think the manufacturers make them so that they get lost all the time. Every time I turn around, I'm losing one. And the problem is, they're expensive. You buy two or three of them and you're at a couple $100. On Amazon, I found these very cool rubber stopper lens caps for about, I think they were about 15, $16 each. And then what happens is they don't sit on the end of the cap. So if you touch them, they don't go flying off. They basically go over it and they hang on to it.
Mhm.
So the only way to get them off is to pull them off. So I've managed to save myself quite a bit of money, and I would absolutely recommend for the large audience of underwater photographers out there and camera enthusiasts as well, that you look at the rubber lens cap covers, and they come in all different sizes as well. So that's the best thing I've bought for under
Nice.
$100.
Uh, to wrap us up, can you share any links, social media handles, best ways to follow up with you or your organization?
Absolutely. So we'd love that. So first and foremost, if you're looking for an AI podcast, go take a look at AI in the Future of Work. Dan Turchin, our CEO, is the host of that. And you can find that on Apple, Spotify, wherever. If you're looking to get in touch with PeopleReign, we're peoplereign.io. And that's PeopleReign, REIGN, because we believe people reign. And then obviously, we're at PeopleReign on Twitter. And then if you look us up on LinkedIn, you can find us under PeopleReign as well.
Perfect, Thom. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Take care.